Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time. I don't know if you heard that, but I banged my gavel. It's time to square off. Let's meet this week's panel for a news-filled week. Respected, very popular Baltimore journalist Jayne Miller is with us. Talk show host Andrew Langer is with us today, and attorneys Tonya Bana and former Oriole bat boy Bob Scherr. Well, here we go. Well, needless to say, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very, very intense week. Many Americans feeling uncertain and fearful about Trump's policies and actions. President Trump was in the Oval Office on day one, signing so many executive orders, as promised, and much to the dismay of police unions, which backed Trump. President issued sweeping pardons for more than 1,500 of those involved in the January 6th Capitol riots. Bob Scherr, we're going to begin with you right now. Go ahead.
Well, it's been a mixed bag week. I mean, I like the fact that he has closed the southern border, and he has already. I think he's responsible for the deal made to release hostages. He is responsible, not Biden. Red tape, he has loosened the red tape on drilling. All that's good. But the pardons of 1,500 rioters is outrageous. I mean, some of them is one thing, but to pardon violent criminals who have assaulted police officers is outrageous. And some of those people have already vowed to get revenge on those people that prosecuted them. I mean, it's outrageous what he did.
Jayne, jump in.
He said he would. I mean, he very much indicated he was going to pardon these folks. So it certainly isn't a surprise. I mean, the fact that he did it, he's done a lot of things. I mean, it looks to me like he's spending his entire first early part of his term just to overturn everything that Biden did. Number one. Number two, the pardons. I mean, we've had this pardon. Look what's going on with both Biden pardoning his family and preemptive pardoning. Now we have the, pardons issued to the folks, 1,500 of the folks who participated in the January 6th, 2021 attack on the Capitol and people. I mean, what do you say? I mean, it's not a surprise. And this is what folks voted for. I think that people that are like shocked are like, wait, you voted for this. This is what you voted for. You shouldn't be shocked. This is what you voted for. And he indicated he would, he called the January 6th defendants hostages, victims. I mean, he was very much indicated that he was going to do what he did. And he did it.
Andrew Langer, welcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jayne and I are largely in agreement on this. I am much more concerned, frankly, with the blanket pardons that were issued by Joe Biden on his way out of office. Because it, to me, at least circumvents the accountability of folks who need to be held accountable for their actions, both in the pandemic and after. The reality is, for the vast majority of Americans, they don't care about Donald Trump pardoning the January 6th rioters. And so much of this is being made into much more than it is, as a way of trying to keep the issue alive. He's pardoned them, so we as a nation are now going to move past this. But I just want to say this, because, Richard, it gets back to your thesis. I'll be brief about this. I think there are more people who are upset because of the way that the media is spinning this first week. This is the Bulwark, the Never Trump organization of nominally former Republicans, has a piece out yesterday. I responded to it, in which they said this is the goal, to do what they can to make people unhappy about the Trump presidency as a way of depressing his approval ratings, as though that were a thing.
All right, Tonya Bana, I saw you touch your hair off camera, so you've got things to say.
Well, I think it's ludicrous to be bothered by preemptive pardons of people who've not even been accused of crimes, and be more bothered by that than the pardoning of actual criminals. That's ridiculous. In any event, I am very troubled by, I think, the overall message that the Trump administration is sending, which is to try to roll back and undo everything done prior to this second administration, because that's not how democracy works. One example is, putting a halt on existing civil rights cases where there are consent decrees. These are cases in which defendants have agreed to ultimately, by through the coercion of the court systems, to agree to certain terms because they've been found to have engaged in unlawful practices, often discriminatory practices. Most of the time, these are practices that happened a decade ago. There is no justification for Donald Trump to stop those cases and impede that those cases that involve things that happened 10 years ago. And I think it sets a dangerous precedent. If we're going to have every 4 years a new president come in and try to overhaul everything that was done before, that's just not how democracy is supposed to work.
That's
One other
exactly.
thing I just would like to say, because everybody else gets to give speeches, is that all this stuff about DEI is ridiculous. It's performative. My husband came up with, I think, the best example to illustrate what DEI really is.
What was that?
The NBA was 100% white men in 1950, and that was because of racism. And when the NBA started to allow people to participate based on merit, it is now an organization that is 70% Black. And I don't think anybody believes that the NBA is picking people because they feel guilty about slavery. They're doing it because they're looking for the best people. And that's really all that DEI is intended to accomplish. It is not about reverse discrimination, and reverse largely doesn't happen.
Where what Tonya said, where that all Trump has done is reverse everything Biden did. Well, let me tell you, Biden did that. Biden tried to reverse everything and did reverse what Trump did with his executive orders. And that's why the border is the mess that it currently is. I do want to take, I do want to disagree with something that you all said about Trump, that everybody knew Trump was going to do these things. Trump indicated that he would pardon people, but he indicated it would be on a case by case, not a mass pardon. And a week before Inauguration Day, J.D. Vance was interviewed and indicated, this is just a week ago, that the violent criminals would not be pardoned.
Right.
Meanwhile, Trump comes in and pardons everybody.
Jayne, go ahead. Then Andrew.
You.
I didn't hear you, Jayne.
Elon didn't say it to Trump. He's not listening. Look, I want to tell you what I think is there are many alarming things about what has gone on in the past week, and one of them involves public health. Trump has essentially shut down information gatherings, meetings, conferences, etc., among public health officials. And we are in the middle of a situation with bird flu that is growing rapidly. This cannot be something that is left to, one message here and one message there by states and local departments. They're going to have to step up. But this is alarming. One of the reasons you have civil service is so that when administrations change, you have a continuity of policy, procedure, etc. Obviously, administrations are going to do some of the things that they want to do and some of their own agendas, but to completely shut down information that is coming from public health officials at a time when information is sorely needed and consistent information. I mean, this is outrageous what's going on. This is not normal. Okay, in a transition. This is not normal.
It absolutely is normal.
It is not normal.
Jayne, as someone who does his
we can only hear one at a time when you're
someone who does his policy work in the executive branch and executive branch regulatory policy, Jayne and Tonya, with respect, this is exactly what happens when a new administration comes in.
No,
don't agree.
Jayne, I'm sorry, Tonya, I say this because you've always been bothered when I dare to interrupt you, so please don't interrupt me.
I agree.
Let me finish, please. This is what happens. The new administration comes in and everything that is in process stops, whether it's regulatory issues or whether it's executive orders, things get reversed. This is exactly what Joe Biden did, because I literally, I don't know why you guys are shaking your heads. I don't know how much time you guys have spent dealing with executive branch issues, but this is what has been done. And so when I go back to and I look at what Joe Biden did on things like transparency and accountability for regulatory agencies, which is something really good that Donald Trump did early on, and got rid of it within the first week, I got a problem with that. But the other part of this, Jayne, real quick, Richard, I promise I won't filibuster, is on the issue of things like public health. Public health has been so thoroughly politicized over the last 8 years that it is incumbent upon a new administration to stop things in process and to make sure that things get reviewed. That's what happens.
All right, Tonya, go ahead.
That's so false as to be like a lie. Like, it's simply untrue. The scale and the magnitude of rolling back is unprecedented. One example, to try to roll back Executive Order 11246, something from 1965, that essentially just codifies the fact that you can't discriminate against people in contracting with the government, is ridiculous. This is not business as usual. It is very, very different. It's dishonest.
Thanks, Tom. Bobby.
I think it's business as usual. I agree with Andrew. When Biden became president, he tried to roll back anything that Donald Trump passed without even looking at the merits of it. For example, especially on the border. I mean, he immediately stopped building the wall. Why? I mean, why? There's no excuse to stop building the wall. He cut it out because Trump wanted it. The policy of remaining in Mexico. How is that a bad thing? That was a wonderful thing achieved by Trump. Biden, without even looking at the merits of it, got rid of it. Why? Because Trump wanted it. Believe me, this is business as usual.
All right, let me interrupt and say that in other executive actions, President Trump revoked a directive barring immigration authorities from making arrests in sensitive areas. Now, this means let me finish. This means immigration and customs enforcement and Border Patrol officers are now permitted to enter schools and churches, also no longer off limits, hospitals, funerals, weddings, and public demonstrations. The Department of Homeland Security says its officers will use common sense in making arrests. Who would like to speak? Jayne?
We had this situation actually during the first Trump term. We had a situation in Baltimore where a migrant was picked up outside his son's school as he dropped his son off to school. And it became a big deal, frankly. There was a restaurant in Baltimore during the first Trump term that closed down because they lost all their workers, or the vast majority of their workers. I mean, there's been a lot written, in the past months about what happens to business in the United States when they lose their migrant workers. I mean, there's no arguing that. If you're going to lose your workforce, you're going to have a tough time staying in business.
I want to say that Mayor Brandon Scott.
What's going on here may be more aggressive than the first term, but it's the same thing that went on in the first Trump term.
Mayor Scott of Baltimore says the city will not interfere with federal agencies' sweeping deportation plans, adding, quote, Baltimore will not go above and beyond to help those agencies. That's from Baltimore's mayor.
I've got a real...
things are like this. The reason things are like this is because of the way Biden handled immigration.
True.
It was horrible what he did. He had open borders.
Hold it, guys.
Since the 1980s.
Wait a minute.
We can only hear one
borders.
person at a time. If a second person talks, it mutes the audio. We hear from no one. So Bob
had open borders his entire 4 years. His border czar never went to the border until she was running for president. I mean, immigration, he did everything he could to encourage illegal immigration. So that's why Trump's doing what he's doing. And let me tell you something. The border, the illegal immigration is going to stop, a lot of it, real quick.
Right.
And it won't, and it's not going to be a problem. It's going to stop real quick now.
We'll come back to Andrew after the break. Good show, a lot of energy, a lot of difference of opinions. But now, ladies and gentlemen, the voice of Square Off, Howard Mallison. Howard, come in.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to change the topic. You know, if you're embarrassed by unsightly toenail fungus, it's
Oh,
time for you to step into confidence with board certified podiatrist and heel specialist, Dr. Kelly Gagan. Her advanced toenail fungus laser treatment is unbelievable. It's FDA approved technology, laser technology that targets the fungus at its source safely, painlessly, and effectively. No harsh medications, no lengthy downtime, just results you can see. Join the many people who have reclaimed their confidence and comfort with Dr. Kelly Gagan. Richard and I have trusted our foot issues to Dr. Gagan, so give her a call at 410-753-4422 to schedule your consultation today. That's podiatrist Dr. Kelly Gagan, because your feet deserve the best. You know, with icy weather conditions and lots of bad drivers on the road, auto accidents are on the rise. And if you've experienced an accident, the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. That's why more and more drivers are trusting their auto repairs and maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models and offer free pickup and delivery anywhere in the Baltimore area. So call them at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. Back to you, Richard.
all right. Don't forget, Leading Edge. They do a great job. And Kelly Gagan, Dr. Gagan. Well, if I had time, Jayne and Tonya and Andrew and Bob, I would take off my shoes and show you my toes.
Please don't.
I will not do that today because I want to talk about the traditional prayer service that happened this past Tuesday at the National Cathedral with the president and vice president in the first pew, Mary Edgar Budde, Washington's Episcopal bishop, speaking directly to Trump. Quote, there are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. Trump posting on his Truth Social that Budde is a radical, left, hardline Trump hater who is not very good at her job, who brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way, and he demanded an apology. The bishop says there will be no apology. Go ahead, Andrew.
I want to focus on the second part of her quote there, because it gets to something that Jayne just talked about, which is concerning to me, which is this justification for the maintenance of the presence of illegal immigrants here in the United States because of the economic benefits to the United States. I got a real hard time with that because this is the same kind of justification. And I'm sorry, Jayne.
I'm not justifying. Whoa. Okay. No, you're not going to keep going. What I am saying is we have not had an effective immigration policy in this country in 40 years.
Got it.
Okay. Tried to have one in 2024, had bipartisan agreement. Trump killed it. What I'm saying is throwing people out of the country like that is going to have an economic impact. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, Budde also went on to talk about this issue, and other folks. Schiff this week was on talking about this: is who's gonna pick our crops? Who's gonna pick our crops if these people go away? And again, this is the point that I was making before, that was the justification for the perpetuation of slavery in the first part of the 19th century. Who's going to pick our crops? What's the economic impact going to be if we all of a sudden free these folks who are enslaved in the South? So I got a real problem with that. We can bring people in legally. Do we need to reform our immigration system? Yes. Do we need to make it easier for guest workers to come in? Yes. If you've ever spoken to someone who owns a crab processing facility, and I've been talking to those folks for more than 20 years, right, they're hungry for having folks come in. But to say that we need to allow for illegal immigrants to stay here because who will pick our crops otherwise or wash our dishes in our restaurants, I got a problem with that.
Right, Tonya. Wait, Tonya. And then Bob. Tonya.
I don't understand why we're talking about immigration when your question, Richard, had to do with a sermon that talked about the legitimate concerns of the LGBTQ community.
Because the second part of her phrase, Tonya, I'm going to now interrupt you. You interrupted me before.
I said no once. You're going on a speech, you're giving a speech again. Please let me finish. You can say whatever you want. Those are legitimate concerns. because whenever our politicians ratchet up the rhetoric around boys wanting to be girls and all these things that are really fringe issues and aren't real, but have been used to galvanize the conservative base, every time that rhetoric gets ratcheted up, those vulnerable folks in those communities are targeted. Violence goes up, people are killed. It isn't just harsh words. It isn't, I'm uncomfortable with you saying X. People are actually getting killed at a higher rate. So that's a real concern. And I would like to think we could agree that that's a bad thing.
I want to hear from Bob.
But
go ahead.
Richard, I've got to respond to this, Richard.
Wait a minute. You all are missing the point. The question you're all discussing the merits of what the bishop said. Who cares what the merits are? The issue is the president of the United States went to a church service to be blessed and by a clergy, wishing him luck in his presidency, not to discuss politics. I don't care what side or what you believe in. That was not the place for the bishop to discuss political events. It was to wish the president well, and she didn't do that.
Hold on, guys. When you jump in, it mutes the audio.
Got it.
Jayne, I'm interested in your opinion about this that came up in the news this week. President Trump signed an order recognizing just two sexes in the United States, male and female, saying those were set at birth and cannot be changed. What's your opinion about that, Jayne?
No, we had a policy. I didn't know we had a prior policy. I mean, to me, I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means. What does that mean? I mean, I don't know.
Jayne, it's performative.
It's performative. I have no idea what that means. Is there a policy now? Does the United States have a policy now about gender?
Yes.
What is it?
There are multiple genders that are getting recognized on official documentation.
Is this
hold on for a second, Jayne. You asked the question. So, for instance,
I'm asking
on the issue of passports and whether passports are going to agree with what's on somebody's driver's license, these are things that are out there right now. In fact, there's an ongoing proceeding. We're about to file comments in it. But I just want to get back to this because, Tonya, again, we're talking about facts. The reason why, I was talking about the immigration part of what Bishop Buddy said is because we were talking about the immigration issue before we went to the break. And then it was the second part of the statement about LGBTQIA issues. And I will add to this, if you've ever spoken to a parent or a young woman who had to compete in a sport against a boy who had decided that he was a girl, then you know that this is a very personal issue to a great many people that are out there. It's not a fringe issue. And if it is a fringe issue, really nobody should care about it if Donald Trump is.
All right, Jayne, it's your turn. Go ahead, Jayne.
I mean, this whole issue of transgender people and them now having a target on their back, I mean, that's real. I mean, it was, you saw the ads during the election. I mean, there was millions and millions and millions of dollars spent by the Republicans and by the Trump campaign to target transgender people. This is a very small percentage of the population, very small percentage of the population.
Then why does it matter?
Good question, Andrew. It's a really good question.
Why does it matter when teachers are being fired because they're you got to use certain pronouns now? You talk about taking something and making it outrageous.
Why do we care?
And it is now. It is. It's outrageous.
Bob, I don't disagree with you that there are things that are out of hand. I am struggling to keep up with the changing lexicon that we're supposed to use if we are completely progressive. Like, it can, but I try. And I don't think that people should be canceled. If they're putting forth a good faith effort to comply with other people's, I think, reasonable requests to be addressed the way they prefer. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. My issue is with, and this applies to both Republicans and Democrats, the fact that the American people are being lost in the marketing. Like, the brand marketing is distracting people from voting in conformity with their real core values and the issues that affect their day-to-day lives. And that is abusive, and we are being manipulated, frankly, instead of having our public servants serve our needs. That's the biggest shame of all, is that I believe, maybe I'm naive, I believe that most of us, all of us on this panel and most Americans we actually agree on probably 80–90% of what impacts our day-to-day lives. Most of us fundamentally believe in what's right and wrong. We care about other people. We don't like to see other people suffer, but we have been polarized and divided by self-serving politicians around issues that are in fact fringe issues and that don't really have a significant impact on the day-to-day lives of most Americans. And in being distracted by that, people are not realizing that they're being manipulated.
I 100% agree.
I agree with what Tonya just said.
100%.
Listen, it's the point that I tried to make early on in this, that we are told to get much, much more spun up about these things than we really need to be. And as I said, there was this piece in the Bulwark that just came out, if it wasn't yesterday, maybe it was the day before, about their goal. Now, this is the big Never Trump Republican organization. Their big goal is to simply drive down Trump's approval rating, as though that were some kind of a legitimate substantive goal. You do this by keeping people spun up, keeping them angry at each other, keeping them frightened. That doesn't help anybody. As we sit here and we talk about whether or not it's normal or abnormal for an incoming presidency to get rid of executive orders and stop regulations and regulatory processes that are in process, that's to say that that's abnormal it helps to spin things up. And it is absolutely normal.
Ladies, gentlemen, we'll take a break. Howard's coming back, and then we'll talk a little bit more. You're watching SquareOff.net. Howard.
Thank you, Rich. Coming on.
There you are.
The law firm of Barry Glazer specializes in personal injury, medical malpractice, and nursing home neglect. His creative TV commercials have made him very recognizable, because Barry tells it like it is. Barry and his team have an in-house doctor and a nurse on staff. In fact, you should call Barry before you call the insurance company. Barry gets you top dollar from the insurance companies. He's that good. So give the law firm of Barry Glazer a call at 410-547-8568 and let them know you heard about him on Square Off. Baltimore is a great diner town, and the Double T diners are always voted #1 in reader polls. TT stands for totally terrific. For breakfast, lunch, dinner, you can't beat the enormous menu selections that will bring you back again and again. There's Double T locations on Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Bel Air, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, try By the Docks in Middle River on their Monday night lobster special, all part of the Double T family. Tell them you heard about them on Square Off too. Back to you, Rich.
Okay. Guys, before we talk a little moment about the Ravens game last weekend and Mark Andrews and what the Buffalo Bills have done for Mark Andrews and his charity, President Trump also signed an executive order declassifying government documents related to the assassinations of President John Kennedy, his brother Robert, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thoughts on that, Jayne?
I don't really have any thoughts about this. I mean, I think some of these records should have been made public a long time ago. There might be some litigation that holds them up. I don't know, but I actually agree with public information. So I think that it's probably past time that some of this information is available to the public.
What about Jeffrey Epstein? What about the Epstein documents?
That's a good question too. That's also a good question.
I think greater transparency and accountability is a good thing at the end of the day, and it's there's a whole host of things that need to be done. Policies that were changed under the Biden administration to make executive branch agencies and administrative law more accountable to the public and more open to the public. I think all of this is a good thing. And listen, this may be a niche issue, but the pardoning of Ross Ulbricht, I think, is a part of in that vein. And a lot of folks don't know about it. I'm not going to don't need to go into the details, but this is part of this transparency and accountability.
All right, we're going to wrap this in a second. I want to ask you guys, I know Jayne, I know a bunch of you, we're all Ravens fans. And what a shame if the Ravens went down to defeat at the hands of the Buffalo Bills. Had Mark Andrews held on to that 2-point pass attempt at the end to tie the game at 27, we'll never know what would have happened after that. What we do know is that Bills fans have raised more than $100,000 for Mark Andrews' Breakthrough T1D, a nonprofit organization devoted to type 1 diabetes research which is supported by Mark Andrews, who's been dealing with this since birth. It's great for Bills fans to do this. Nicholas Howard, who's one of their fans, started a GoFundMe page. Mark has received death threats. He's been threatened, all kinds of things.
Outrageous.
It's crazy. So we want to thank the Buffalo Bills and their organization for putting up. Now it's more than $100,000. Pretty good, right, Jayne?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice gesture. I mean, look, in football, all kinds of things happen. I mean, the Ravens, that wasn't the only turnover. I mean, the fumble prior in the quarter. But, you tie the game up at 27-27. There was still a minute 30 left in the game. And, the Bills moved the ball pretty easily. So they could have easily moved down the field to kick the field goal to win the game. Who knows what would have happened? They could have fumbled and we would have scored a touchdown and won the game. Who knows? But the point
Mark Andrews
is in a football
Mark
game.
Andrews is a class act.
True.
And, I feel horrible for him. I mean, I really do. He has publicly come out this week with a statement saying that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to him in his life, how horrible and guilty he feels. I mean, Mark Andrews has done a lot for the Ravens. It's
Amen.
just one of those things. And the Ravens, had other opportunities to win the game and they didn't. It's not just
Correct.
Mark Andrews' fault.
All right, guys. Tonya, you want to say anything about this?
I would encourage the American people to look at at the Republicans and the Democrats who are lining their own pockets instead of looking out for our interests. If we realize that and work together, we could actually elect some politicians that are looking out for the best interests of most Americans.
Final word from Andrew.
Well, listen, I think at the end of the day, the Ravens had a spectacular season. It would have been great if they'd shown up a little bit earlier in the game and not had to rely on this. But boy, oh boy, it's just been a pleasure to watch them all year. And I look forward to next year's season.
Well, I want to thank all of you, the panel here, Andrew and Bob and Jayne and Tonya, and our audience at squareoff.net, which continues to grow thanks to each of you. Very lively discussion, feisty opinions, and I'm Richard Sher, and we will see you next time when once again, boom, we square off. Bye-bye, everybody. Be safe.